Sonic is one of the biggest icons in gaming history, yet despite this, there are so many Sonic games that are trapped in purgatory on old game consoles. So let's take a look at a few of them. Okay, so I'm already cheating with the first entry since this game isn't on a console, but I figured, hey, how many times am I going to be able to talk about Sega Sonic the Hedgehog? This is an arcade game released back in 1993. You might find the name of the game kinda dumb. It seems a bit weird including the name of the development company as a part of the game's name. It's like calling Zelda The Legend of Nintendo Zelda, but the reason why this happened is most likely a Japanese trademark issue with the name Sonic between Sega and another Japanese arcade developer, Taito, responsible for iconic arcade games like Space Invaders and Bubble Bobble. Taito released an arcade game in Japan called Sonic Blast Man, and there may have been a conflict over the name Sonic, so Sega ended up branding this game and a lot of other early Japanese Sonic merchandise with the Sega Sonic name. Now, none of that has anything to do with why this game hasn't been re-released on any other platforms yet, but hey, like I said, I don't know how many times I'm going to be able to talk about Sega Sonic the Hedgehog, so anyway. It's weird this game hasn't gotten any sort of port, unless you want to count stuff like Waku Waku Sonic Patrol Car or Sega Sonic Popcorn Shop. This is the first full Sonic the Hedgehog arcade game, so there is some historical value there. One reason may be because this game uses a trackball for moving your characters, so it's possible Sega didn't know how to make a port that could faithfully control like the original. An interview with Sonic co-creator Yuji Naka and GameSpy actually supports this, as Naka claimed that there were plans to include Sega Sonic the Hedgehog in the Sonic Gems collection, but due to the difficulty in emulating the trackball controls with standard game controllers, it was scrapped. This is a sad reality for a lot of games with strange control schemes. Mighty the Armadillo and Ray the Flying Squirrel, the two characters who debuted in this game, did make a return to the franchise in Sonic Mania Plus as playable characters, so it's not like Sega forgot about these guys or that they refused to acknowledge this game's existence. While not super likely, I don't think it's impossible for this game to be re-released. I'll give this game a 3 out of 5 chance of being re-released. Knuckles Chaotix. This 1995 32X game does have some stuff going for it. This game has Mighty in it, and it was the debut of Team Chaotix as playable characters who have become relatively notable Sonic characters. I'm not too familiar with the 32X from a technical perspective, but the 32X is an add-on for the Sega Genesis, so it's possible the architecture is more complex, making it difficult to emulate accurately, but at the same time, it's still at its core a 2D classic Sonic game, and we've seen that the retro engine, the engine used for the many remakes of the other classic Sonic games, is enough for the job. But probably the biggest issue that's causing this game to not be re-released is no one cares about this game. No one is putting this game in their top 10, top 20, not even their top 40 favorite Sonic games. I don't even think Sega cares about this game. The 32X was much more of a Sega of America thing. It's very obvious that Sega of Japan cared very little about the 32X. The add-on was released in Japan less than 2 weeks after Sega's big next-generation console, the Sega Saturn, which was already a death sentence for the 32X, and to add insult to injury, the already minuscule library of games for the 32X in America was even smaller in Japan, with a total of only 18 32X games being released in Japan. Sonic fans don't really care about Knuckles Chaotix, and Sega doesn't care about Knuckles Chaotix. So, yeah. Knuckles Chaotix. Next up is Sonic R, released in 1997 for the Sega Saturn. This is an interesting case because this game has seen a number of re-releases from a PC port to its inclusion in the Sonic Gems collection. However, for the last decade and a half, this game has been MIA. It could just be because amongst most Sonic fans and the gaming community as a whole, Sonic R is not considered to be one of the good Sonic games. It could also be because this is a Sega Saturn game, and the Sega Saturn era is easily Sonic's most forgotten age in history. Heck, even the Dark Age of Sonic is brought up more often in the Sonic community than the Saturn era. Sonic 3D Blast also came out during this era, however, that game has gotten re-released way more than Sonic R. I think the reason why Sonic 3D Blast gets re-released more often is because while 3D Blast was released on the Saturn, it also has a version on the Genesis, and this is the version you'll likely see released on other platforms. Because of the Genesis version, 3D Blast kinda gets lumped in with all of the other classic Sonic Genesis games by association. It's like how even the Benchwarmers and the Waterboys get championship rings when their NBA team wins the finals. The only other Sonic game for the Saturn is Sonic Jam, and that's a collection, so it's pretty obvious why that isn't getting re-released. In recent years, fans have warmed up to Sonic R some, but I still don't think it's likely to see a port anytime soon. I'll give this game a 1 out of 5 chance to get a re-release. Let's move on to Sonic Pocket Adventure. This is a game that 99% of the people watching this video have never played, myself included. This game was released in 1999 for the Neo Geo Pocket Color, which I believe makes it the last Sonic game released in the 20th century. The reason why this game hasn't been re-released is pretty apparent. I mean, do you own a Neo Geo Pocket Color? This is an obscure game on an obscure console, and it didn't introduce any impactful new characters to the series. I give this game a 0.5 out of 5 chance of getting re-released. I'm not gonna say it's impossible because heck, GoldenEye got a re-release on Switch Online. Our next game is an odd one, Sonic Shuffle for the Dreamcast, released in 2000. This game is another one that wasn't particularly well received, but it is an interesting one as it's a Sonic party game. It's no secret that this is a pretty obvious attempt by Sega to capitalize off of the success of Mario Party. They even got the developers of Mario Party, Hudson Soft, to work on this game, so hey, I gotta give Sega some credit for going all the way when it comes to copying Nintendo's homework. This is a concept I would love for Sega to try again. This really isn't a game I hear people talk about at all. I wouldn't call it obscure, but I also wouldn't call it popular either. For that reason, I don't think Sega has any real reason to re-release this game. I give it a 0.75 out of 5 chance of getting re-released. Next on the list is the Sonic Advance series, which started in 2001 with the release of Sonic Advance on the Game Boy Advance. I'm not going to waste any time here. I am positively flabbergasted that these games aren't on Steam or Nintendo Switch or something. These games were on the Japanese Wii U eShop, but for some reason they never got a Western re-release. The Advance series is well liked by the fanbase, and they all reviewed well too. Sega could easily release all 3 games in a collection for like 15, at most 20 bucks, and it'd be great. What the Genesis era Sonic games were for 90s kids are what the Advance games were for 2000s kids. Great 2D Sonic fun. If I had to nail down why these games haven't been re-released in America, it might have something to do with the fact that the now defunct company THQ were the publishers of the first 2 Sonic Advance games in North America, and they were also the publishers of Sonic Advance 3 in North America and Europe. Nordic Games acquired many of THQ's assets, so maybe Sega has to make some sort of deal with Nordic, but hey, I'm no expert on the matter. In any case, I give it a 4 out of 5 chance for these games to get re-released. In a similar vein to the last entry, next we have Sonic Battle, released in 2004 for the Game Boy Advance, which was also published by THQ in North America and Europe. Unfortunately, while Sonic Battle does have its fans, it wasn't as positively received as the Advance series, so I don't really see this game getting a re-release. Maybe I could see it being bundled with the Advance series if they were to do a collection, kind of like how they just threw the Game Gear games into the Sonic Gems collection. You could probably throw Sonic Pinball Party in there too for one big Sonic GBA collection. Anyway, I give it a 1 out of 5 chance for Sonic Battle to get re-released and a 0.5 out of 5 chance for Sonic Pinball Party. Now this is where things start getting interesting. Sonic Heroes released in 2003 for the GameCube, PS2, and Xbox. This is the first mainline Sonic game on the list, which makes it really surprising that it's been so long since the game has been re-released. Sonic Heroes sold very well, likely because it was multi-platform, and thanks to the success of the Adventure series, the Advance series, and the Sonic X cartoon, the Sonic brand was riding high at the time. This game was also my first Sonic game, so it's thanks to this game that I'm forever trapped in the infinite depressing spiral of being a Sonic fan. The reason why this game may not have gotten a recent re-release is probably because the reception to the game was not great. It didn't review particularly well, and even fans of the series consider it to be when 3D Sonic started to lose some of its luster. I've heard that another reason why this game hasn't been re-released in recent years is possibly because of the engine that the game used. Sonic Heroes runs on the now forgotten Renderware engine, which was developed by Criterion Software, who were acquired by EA. Games made using Renderware have been ported and re-released though, so I don't think it's a technical issue with Renderware itself. Perhaps it's a legal concern with the Renderware license now that EA owns Criterion? I'm not sure. I give Sonic Heroes a 3 out of 5 chance to get re-released. Next up is, oh yeah, I don't think I need to explain this one too much. Guns, cursing, weird story decisions, 0.01 out of 5 chance that this game gets re-released. I'm pretty sure Sega wants you to forget that this game ever existed. Okay, back to the good stuff with the Sonic Rush series, which began in 2005 with the release of Sonic Rush on the Nintendo DS. Like the Advance series, this is another handheld Sonic series that is well liked by the fanbase. It introduced a popular character in Blaze the Cat, it's really straightforward, high-speed boosting fun, and it's got some of the best music that the Sonic franchise has to offer. As for why these games haven't seen a re-release, well, it might have to do with the fact that these games are for the Nintendo DS. The DS is one of the weirdest consoles Nintendo has ever made, which makes it difficult to port its games to other platforms. The DS has 2 screens, one of them is a touchscreen, and there's also the microphone that the console has. The Wii U also has access to 2 screens, one being a touchscreen and a microphone, so it made sense that there were a handful of DS games on the Virtual Console for that system, but there weren't a ton of DS games released for it, and now the service is gone, so yeah, I think that kinda kills all of the chances of the Rush games getting re-released on the Wii U, and I think the Wii U was probably the best console for the job, outside of, the 3DS. The Rush series made frequent use of the dual screens of the DS and the touchscreen, so re-releasing these games for other platforms would be tricky. These games are still pretty popular though, and they both reviewed rather well, so I'd give the Rush series a 3 out of 5 chance of getting re-released. We have another series here, and that is the Sonic Riders series, which began in 2006 with the release of Sonic Riders on the GameCube, PS2, and Xbox, with a PC release later that year. The Riders series is another one that is a bit iffy. The Riders series never reviewed well, and the last game in the series, Sonic Free Riders, is considered to be one of the worst Sonic games ever made. Free Riders is also an exclusive for Xbox's motion control gimmick thing, the Xbox Connect, so that's another knock against the game. The first 2 Sonic Riders games have their fans, and you can't go wrong with the Sonic Racing series, but it seems as though Sega is more interested in kart racers these days. I've never been the biggest fan of the series, but I'll always enjoy its sense of style. The Sonic Riders series does have the benefit of being, well, a series. While I highly doubt Sega would release any of these games again individually, Sega could pretty easily just slap these games into a collection. So I'll give the series a 1.5 out of 5 chance of getting re-released. Next up is Sonic 06. This game is not coming back. I give it a 0.00001 out of 5 chance of getting re-released. Okay, next up is the Sonic Rivals series, which started in 2006 with the release of Sonic Rivals on the PSP. Out of every Sonic sub-series, from the Adventure series to the Rush series to the Riders series, the Rivals series is probably the most forgotten. I never hear anyone bring up these games. I actually played these games quite a bit growing up, so I do have a soft spot in my heart for these games, especially the second game. Sonic Rivals 2 has a good selection of playable characters, including some characters we don't get to play as much, like Silver, Espio, and Metal Sonic. The general consensus from what I've heard from the fanbase is that the Sonic Rivals games are okay. Not great, not terrible, not good, not bad, just okay. And I think that kinda explains why these games haven't been re-released recently. No one really cares about this series. They were never even released in Japan, which is another knock against these games getting re-released. I'd give the series like a 1 out of 5 chance of getting re-released. The next Sonic series we have is the Sonic Storybook series, consisting of Sonic and the Secret Rings, released in 2007, and Sonic and the Black Knight, released in 2009, both for the Nintendo Wii. Yeah, these games are not getting re-released. These games are considered by fans to be some of the worst Sonic games ever made. These games are the prime examples for dumb motion controls on the Wii. These games help turn a really bad but possibly salvageable rough patch in Sonic's history into a dark age. I do think that these games have a slightly better chance of being re-released than Shadow the Hedgehog or Sonic 06, simply because while the Storybook series is really bad, they aren't brand destroying. At the end of the day, all the Storybook games are just bad games. They didn't turn Sonic into a joke like Shadow and 06 did, so since I gave Shadow the Hedgehog a 0.01 chance, I'd give the Storybook series a 0.02 out of 5 chance of getting re-released. Next up is Sonic Chronicles: The Dark Brotherhood, released in 2008 for the Nintendo DS. I could give similar reasons as the Sonic Rush series for this game not getting a re-release given that it is a DS game, but another reason is that Sonic Chronicles is not a good game. Despite being made by a very well-respected RPG company in BioWare, the game was not a very good RPG. But even that might not be the main reason why this game probably won't see any kind of re-release. This is a huge rabbit hole to dive into, but the quick and dirty version is that there are some legal issues regarding some of the characters in Sonic Chronicles between a previous writer for the SonicArchive comics and Sega, and I'm sure Sega would rather not waste their time dealing with that. So, in a rare twist, I honestly see this game as being the least likely Sonic game to get a re-release. I gave Sonic 06 a 0.00001 chance of getting a re-release, so I'd give this game a 0.00001 chance of getting a re-release. For our final games of the day, we have the Sonic Boom series, and yeah, I don't see these games getting a re-release either. The Boom series started off awfully with the release of Sonic Boom Rise of Lyric in 2014 for the Wii U, and this game is considered to be the second coming of Sonic 06. The same day that Rise of Lyric was released, Sonic Boom Shattered Crystal was released on the 3DS, and while it is viewed more positively than its Wii U counterpart, it was still seen as a pretty bad game. After it seemed like we had finally gotten past the dark age of Sonic, Sega threw us right back in. Sonic was a laughingstock again. We did get another game in the series, Sonic Boom Fire and Ice, and this one actually managed to get decent reviews, so at least the Boom series ended off on a more positive note. But even so, I don't ever see these games getting re-released. For the most part, the only reason why I ever hear people bring up Sonic Boom these days is in reference to the Sonic Boom cartoon, which actually does have its fair share of fans. It even did well enough to run for 2 seasons consisting of a total of 104 episodes. As for the games though, yeah, none of these had enough impact to ever warrant any sort of re-release. I'm sure Sega would love to just move on and call Sonic Boom a failed alternate universe spin-off experiment. I give this series a 0.00001 chance of being re-released. Obviously, I didn't talk about every Sonic game that hasn't gotten a re-release in a long time, just the ones that were popular, notable, or that I felt like talking about. But hopefully I managed to explain why I think some of these games may or may not get some sort of re-release in the future. It's a shame, honestly, that some of these games like Heroes and the Advance series and the Rush series are still trapped on these dead consoles. And even for the games that probably should be trapped on these dead consoles like Shadow and 06 and the Storybook series, I think it would be kinda cool to have these games available for preservation reasons. For how bad it is, Sonic 06 is one of the most important games of all time. It was basically a rite of passage for any game reviewer in the early 2010s to make a video about Sonic 06. How bad this game is legendary. If Sega had the balls to re-release this game, man, I would give them major props. No bug fixes, no story changes, no optimizations, just one day at a press event be like, oh yeah, Sonic 06, dropping today, have fun. But yeah, I'm pretty sure most of these games Sega wants you to forget about, so they'll just let them die on these dead consoles. It is what it is. We'll just have to break out the old PS3 and relive the glory days.